All right, we are ready to start our first play in our tragedy unit. So, our tragedy unit will consist of several things. Oedipus Rex, the quintessential tragedy. We're going to read Hamlet, we're going to read Tess of the D'Urbervilles, we'll probably read Death of a Salesman, and depending on time, possibly some other things. So it's important to understand Oedipus Rex. This was 400 BC. This is the quintessential tragedy. Aristotle said it's the most perfect tragedy available. So we need to talk about what traits this play has that make it a perfect tragedy. So Aristotle's definition of tragedy, he thought that a tragic hero, and a tragic hero people always get confused every year. It doesn't mean they're a hero like Superman. It just basically means they're a protagonist of a tragedy. So things are kind of stacked against them, and despite that, they have something admirable that they do, even if it results in failure. So, according to Aristotle, a traditional tragic hero has to be of high estate, someone like a king or a prince or something like that. You may have read Macbeth last year. Think about Macbeth. Even though he's not king when the play starts, he's fairly high up on the social ladder. The same protagonist has to fall from power and happiness, yet at the same time, he or she possesses a noble quality, something that makes the audience or the reader sympathize with them. They have to have some kind of fatal flaw or weakness. And everyone does, right? We all have something that makes us human. But for a tragic hero, they often don't know when to stop, or they'll take it to the extreme. Think about Macbeth. He got his first promotion admirably, right? He earned it. And when the witches told him he was going to be king, his ambition, and it was especially motivated by his wife, but his ambition got in the way, and he pushed that to the limits. Sometimes that fatal flaw is called hubris, which is excessive pride, overconfidence. Some critics do argue that Oedipus in the play that we're going to read doesn't have a tragic flaw. And finally, the tragic hero has to be able to make their own decisions. There are some other important elements of tragedy. One of them is the audience will experience catharsis. This is a purging, a feeling of relief after watching something bad happen to other people. I always think of those movies like The Purge, where we watch horrible things happen to other people. We don't act upon them ourselves, but watching others go through that does something to humans. If you've read 1984, they had every day a thing called the 2 minutes of hate. And for 2 minutes, they would play film and put pictures up on the screen of the people's enemies. And people were encouraged to throw things at the screen, to scream, and that basically allowed people to get out their more animalistic desires in a safe and productive way. It's kind of the same thing. When you see a tragedy, you kind of purge your emotions, and then you're better able to conform to society. A tragedy will arouse sympathy and fear. There's got to be some kind of recognition about the main character. So in Macbeth, remember he was told he couldn't be killed by any man, quote, of woman born. Well, there was a loophole there, and Macduff wasn't actually born from a woman. He was cut out of the womb of his mother. And so technically, the prophecy was true. Macbeth misread that, thinking he was immortal, essentially. And there's got to be a reversal in fortune. So it's usually the opposite of what was intended. So for Macbeth, he wanted to become king. Obviously, that didn't quite work out that way. In Oedipus, there's a scene where the messenger tries to cheer him up with news about his father's death, but inadvertently he ends up making Oedipus worse. So the background on Oedipus Rex. It's based on a folktale, so it's not clear how much, if any, is actually true. Think about George Washington and chopping down the cherry tree, or things like that. How much of that is actually true? It's kind of become a legend. So the etymology of Oedipus. Ed means swollen, and pus, like an octopus, means foot. So his name means swollen foot. So in short, and there are going to be spoilers in this background, because the audience and the viewers would have known all this ahead of time. So it does add to the dramatic tension. We know a little bit more than the characters on stage. In a nutshell, an upper-class couple had a baby. An oracle, who's like a prophet, who can supposedly communicate with the gods and predict the future through that. So an oracle told them that their baby, Oedipus, would grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. Well, that wasn't good, so they decided to leave the baby in the wilderness. If they really wanted to be sure about it, they would have killed the baby, but they didn't. Instead, they pierced and bound his feet and left him in the wilderness, assuming that he would die. I know this sounds horrible, and it is. It was more common back then than we would imagine. More spoilers here. The baby, Oedipus, was adopted, and his adopted parents never told him he was adopted. He heard rumors, he asked them several times. They would not tell him the truth. So to find the truth, he visited an oracle who told him the same thing his parents were told, that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Oedipus has a admirable quality, which is he didn't want to do that, obviously, so he left home to avoid fulfilling that horrible prophecy. Among his many adventures, and this all happens before the story takes place, he's out on the road traveling, and he comes to Thebes, which is where the story takes place. There's a sphinx guarding the town. Now, a sphinx is this creature with usually a lion body, sometimes wings, human head, various variations of that. But the sphinx decides to eat any visitor who cannot solve its riddle, so basically it eats everyone. Oedipus, out of all the people in the world who encounter the sphinx, is the only one that could solve the riddle. And the riddle is, what has 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Anyone get it? It's a human, so a crawling baby, a walking adult, and then an older adult with a cane. So Oedipus gets it, he solves the riddle. As a prize or an award, he gets to marry the Queen of Thebes and become king. Big question for this play, and one that you'll be writing an essay on, is fate versus free will. Does Oedipus have the ability to avoid killing his parents, even though the oracles told him that he would do so? Think about Macbeth. I think most of you have read Macbeth last year, probably, or 10th grade, rather. If the witches had not told Macbeth about his destiny of becoming king, would he have become king anyway? Is that a possibility? I mean, he was admirable. He seemed to be getting promotions on his own. I don't know that he would have been motivated to kill the king, but would he have filled that prophecy anyway? Or are they messing with his mind? Would he not have done that? Would he not have gone anywhere near being king? What about Oedipus? If the oracle hadn't told his parents that he would grow up to kill and marry them, would he have done so? I mean, can you accidentally kill your father and marry your mother? Wouldn't you know what you were doing? Wouldn't you take some precautions not to do that? So that's a big question to think about as you read the play. There's lots of cultural links. Many works that you've probably read or heard of have riddles. In The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit, the protagonist, engages in a riddle competition with Gollum. And here's an example. This thing all things devours, birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard stones to meal, slays kings, ruins towns, and beats high mountain down. And the answer to this one is time. In The Never-Ending Story, which was a movie from the 80s, there are these sphinxes, and you don't have to answer a riddle, but you have to, if you want to pass through, you have to walk between them, and if your heart is not pure, they basically shoot, I don't know, lasers or something out of their eyes and vaporize you. So in some ways, it was like the sphinx that was guarding Thebes. You had to answer a riddle, or they would devour you. Freud, if you've taken psychology or are interested in that, Freud, who is a psychoanalyst, theorized that children around ages 3 to 5 will have some kind of desire for the parent of the opposite sex and will subconsciously desire the death of the other parent. His theories are theories, of course. I'm not saying this is true, but he refers to this as the Oedipal complex because Oedipus, the protagonist of Oedipus Rex, basically does this. He kills his father, as the prophecy said, and marries his mother. Or so it is said that he does. There's some videos that talk about the basics of ancient Greek theater. Many of our modern theaters are modeled after the ancient Greek plays. They were mostly done in amphitheaters, so outdoors. The seating would be such that the voice would echo and carry, and the actors, obviously without electric microphones, could carry their voices. Part of what helped them with this were masks, and sometimes the masks would have like a bullhorn inside that would help to project their voices. The masks would help the audience understand who they were. If they were supposed to be a god, this one looks like Bacchus, the god of wine and revelry. If they were supposed to be a smiling character, a frowning character, etc. There is a YouTube link on Vision if you're interested. It's a movie from the 1950s. It was done in English, but it was done with the characters all wearing masks. It's a little bit creepy, but it does give you an idea of what the plays might have looked like back in 400 BC. Speaking of creepy, in college, my classics professor had us watch, and it was recited in the ancient Greek language, a play where the characters had masks like this. And to me, it was almost like watching a nightmare unfold. It was just very creepy. And at some points, they dance across the stage, so they'll all go to the right, and then they'll all go to the left, and they'll chant things in unison. It's a little bit strange. But the chorus, think about in a sitcom how there's that dubbed line. If someone says something funny or insults another character, you hear the audience kind of jeering at that or laughing or ooh, something like that. The chorus in some ways is doing that. They're a reaction shot. So you're following the plot, and the chorus is like an interlude. They would sing, so it's almost like music, the soundtrack in a modern film. But they'd also reinforce to the audience, this is what a general audience member would be thinking or feeling or saying at the time. In the play Oedipus Rex, the chorus does not know the backstory of Oedipus the way that we do and the way that the members of the audience back in 400 BC would have likely known the story of Oedipus. So they're discovering what's happening along with all the characters on stage. The audience, in some ways, knows more than the chorus. Here's where it gets a little gross. I'm sorry. So Oedipus's family tree. Queen Jocasta married King Laius, and they had a son, Oedipus. Everything was fine until an oracle said, "Your son is going to kill Laius and marry Jocasta." And the parents said, "Well, no, let's bind his feet and leave him to die." So Oedipus was picked up out of pity. Someone found him and brought him to another pretty wealthy couple named Merope and Polybus. They adopted him, and the oracle at some point told Oedipus, "Wait, you're going to kill your father and marry your mother." Now remember, they did not tell him that he was adopted, so Oedipus believed this is his mother and this is his father. Obviously, he did not want to fulfill what the oracle told him. So he decided he was going to run away. So later near Thebes, remember Thebes is where the Sphinx is guarding and not letting anyone in. Queen Jocasta and King Laius are there, and as far as they know, several years earlier they had a child, they left him to die, the prophecy wasn't carried out. If you think about it, Oedipus is a full, he's grown up, probably older than you, so he's a full-grown adult. This was maybe 20 years ago that they had him, so they think everything's fine. So he shows up, they're outside of Thebes, he doesn't know who King Laius is, King Laius doesn't know who Oedipus is. They're on the road, they're in a narrow passage where one of them has to make way for the other. So the king, he's like, "Hey, I'm a king, get out of my way." And Oedipus is like, "But I'm Oedipus and I'm very prideful, get out of my way." So they fight, and Oedipus wins, kills the king. Doesn't know he's a king, just kills him. Out of kind of like road rage. Not excusable, but still. So while he's there, he encounters a sphinx who says, "Hey, no one can solve my riddle." And Oedipus says, "I can." And the Sphinx says, darn it. So remember, King Laios has disappeared, he's been killed. Jocasta's all by herself. Oedipus has saved the day, he's defeated the Sphinx, now people can enter and exit Thebes. Queen Jocasta, how smart you are, let's get married, sounds great. Oedipus thinks his parents are far, far away. He's not going to end up marrying his mother, everything's awesome. And they have 4 kids together, so that's something. So remember, this is his mother, it's him. So these are his children, these are her children, but they're also technically her grandchildren. I told you it was gross. So again, going back to your essay topic, do you think we're bound by fate or do we have free will? I want you to think about, when you read the play, really going into depth. Don't just look at superficial things. Look at what some of the characters say. Some of the characters, like the priest, the prophet Tiresias, they have a lot of strong religious faith, and they really believe the will of the gods is what controls them. Other characters, like Oedipus and Jocasta, believe that they have the power to change things for themselves. So I want you to look at characters, look at their backgrounds and their assumptions, look at how the chorus reacts to different characters, and really use that to support your point. To get the level 9 on your essay for this class, you really want to delve deep. Don't just look at the superficial. Think about Oedipus's personality traits. What makes him admirable and what would be a liability? So just from our discussion today, for example, his admirable trait is, well, he doesn't want to kill his dad or marry his mom. He escapes to try to avoid that. But a liability would be his pride. He doesn't move out of the way when he gets in a fight with his actual father. He doesn't stop and think, wait, a prophet told me I might kill my father one day. Let me stop and logically determine if this man could possibly be my father. Should I actually kill him over not getting out of my way on the road, or should I just let this whole thing blow over? So that would be an example. Remember the idea of catharsis. The audience is experiencing this. It's almost like when you drive by a train wreck or an accident and you can't look away.